Breaking news around injuries at Arsenal and some good news, actually. We know that we had a lot of problems in the Arsenal-Tottenham North London derby around injuries. Declan Rice came off injured at halftime. Just before the game, the news broke that Leandro Trossard wasn't fit and was missing from the game. And also previous to that, we've suffered injuries to Thomas Partey, which has been a big blow, and also to Gabriel Martinelli. Now, the news that is breaking today and is coming out all over X, all over everywhere right now, is that all four of those are expected to be fit to face Manchester City in 13 days' time, which is very, very good news indeed. We know that we're going to need the team to be at absolute full strength to take on the champions. And it was very worrying, you know, having a look at some of the injuries that we've been seeing in recent times. The big ones, of course, are Gabriel Martinelli, who missed the Spurs game and was sorely missed and, you know, was really, really looking on good form before he got that injury. Leandro Trossard also, 2 goals in 2 games, missed the North London derby. Big blow. When you consider some of the chances that we missed, he is a very clinical player and could have played a really big part in that game. He's going to be back for that game. And a big one for me is Declan Rice. I mean, when he came off at halftime, you saw in that game against Tottenham Hotspur that we lost control of the midfield. We just didn't look the same. And the big error that led to the goal came through Jorginho making a mistake in that defensive midfield position that probably Declan Rice wouldn't have made, and that ultimately cost us the whole 3 points in the game. So to have Declan Rice back for what's going to be the biggest game of Arsenal's season so far is vitally, vitally important. And also news coming through that Thomas Partey is ahead of schedule and also could figure in that game against Manchester City. So that's really, really good news. Also, you've got to take into account the fact that, you know, Manchester City are going to be missing the influential Rodri, who's always been a massive player for Manchester City in the big games. We remember in that really tight game against Arsenal a couple of seasons ago, where he was the one who got the winning goal, and he's always an influence in these games. And for Manchester City to be missing such a big player in that game, again, gives Arsenal a bit of an advantage. So good news around injuries, because I have to admit, you know, the injury thing was really starting to get really, really worrying for Arsenal. You know, there are lots of games coming up. You know, we've got Champions League games coming up, another game against Lens next week. That'll probably come too early for most of those players. So again, could be a lot of those players that might miss out on that Lens game away in the Champions League. But to get them back for that Manchester City game would be really, really good. And then, of course, directly after that Manchester City game, we go into a 2-week international break, and then we come back on the other end facing Chelsea. So important games coming up. You know what I mean? In, you know, into October, into November, and we really, really need a fit squad. So getting back those key players is absolutely essential. So it's good news. And I'm glad I'm bringing you a bit of good news, because I don't know if you guys are thinking the same thing, but if we would have had, and listen, I'm not making any excuses, please don't see it as excuses, but if we would have had a full squad against Tottenham, and some of those players would have been in there, would we necessarily have dropped the points in that game, do you think? Or do you think that, you know, we would have had a, say, strong enough bench to recover that game later on when, you know, you could see that so many players look really, really tired in it? Who knows? Who knows? And you can't use that as an excuse. You have to go with the players you've got, and you've got to weather injuries. And if you actually look at Manchester City, who the team that we're facing in a couple of weeks' time, they've had injuries to a lot of major players, like John Stones has been out. You know, as I said, Rodri is going to be missing, but they always seem to be able to bring in players from their squad that replace those players seamlessly. Whether they'll be able to do that with Rodri is a different matter, because he is a very, very important player. But we're going to have to wait and see how that pans out. But definitely, I feel if these players come back, it's a bit of an advantage for Arsenal going into that game against Manchester City at home, which is a game that I really feel that I wouldn't call it a must win, but I call it a game that we mustn't lose. City are already, 4 points above us. Don't really want to be losing that game. And the weird thing about it is that despite the brilliant start of the season that Manchester City have had, if we were to win our next away game against Bournemouth, which hopefully we'll do, and then we beat Manchester City, say something we haven't done for a very long time, in that game we'd be a point behind them. That's how earlier on in the season it is at the moment. And I think if we've got to beat Man City soon, man, it's time to turn the tables, right? So the only way we're going to do that is if we get these players back, because they are such a strong side. And so it's great news that they're coming back. So once again, just to repeat, the breaking news is Declan Rice, Gabriel Martinelli, Leandro Trossard and Thomas Partey are all expected to be fit to face Manchester City in 13 days' time. The Declan Rice injury isn't as serious as was first anticipated, and Thomas Partey is ahead of schedule. That's according to John Cross from the Mirror. He's saying that Thomas Partey is ahead of schedule as well and should be back in the squad. And the stronger squad we have to face Manchester City in the game, that can only bode well for Arsenal going into that game. Don't forget to check out all of our great content that we've got coming up on the channel. We've got the fallout from the game against Tottenham, the North London derby. Make sure you check out Forever Arsenal. Forever Arsenal, and that was absolutely brilliant. The Bias Premier League show, and lots of the fan cams from over the weekend. So if you want to check that out. Also, don't forget, we've got the game coming up against Brentford on Wednesday night in the Carabao Cup. Going to be a really interesting one, this. Obviously, none of those players that I just mentioned there will be anywhere near the squad because they're all in recovery. But what sort of a team will Mikel Arteta put out for that Brentford game? That's going to be really interesting to see. You know what I mean? Will Smith-Rowe get a start right from the beginning? Does Havertz start immediately down the middle? And also, is this a game that Aaron Ramsdale comes back in for? Or will David Raya start this game against his old club? That's going to be really, really interesting to see. And then coming up towards the weekend, we go away to Bournemouth. We're going to be making some great content around that. We're going to be down at Bournemouth this week doing some preview stuff. So make sure you keep an eye out for that. But that's a huge game after we drop 2 points in the North London derby. And hopefully we can bounce back in that. So look out for all that great content coming out here on AFTV. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you soon.